Okay, good morning, everybody. It's Peter here from AJS, and once again, we're bringing you a demonstration live online from a jeweller's workshop somewhere around Australia. And this week, we're coming to you from sunny Geelong. And it's my delight to welcome once again Chris Sherwin. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Peter. Welcome, everybody.
Great to have you on board again. And I know Chris is really excited about today's presentation, and it's to do with making bales for pendants. Do you just want to take us through what we're going to get up to today, Chris?
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, today I'm going to continue the discussion we started a little while ago about making findings for jewellery. And today we're going to talk about something which seems really simple, making a bale for the top of a pendant or a pearl enhancer for a pearl enhancer clasp or something like that. It has technical issues with it. They can be very simple. We'll start with the simplest form of bale, and then we'll move up to something a bit more sophisticated. So it's really how we connect a chain or a string of pearls to a pendant hanging from it. Sounds very simple, but actually takes quite a bit of thought, and there's a lot of technique involved.
It's the old story, Chris. Everything's simple when you know how.
That's right, Peter.
Yeah.
Everything's so simple.
I like your strategy. Let's start with the simplest and progress from there. So which one are we doing first?
Well, we'll start fairly simple. So this is quite a large piece, solid gold, of course. So this would be a very large pendant, and it's just a struck minted medallion.
Which Olympics did you win that in, Chris?
It was in 2006, the John Landy Club duathlon. I had to swim and run to win that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. 72 grams, but unfortunately it's not solid gold. It's just bronze and gold plated. So it is very heavy. So I've made a simple pendant for that. That'll just sit inside this recess. There'll be rub set. And you'll notice on the very top of that, there's a little loop. And onto that loop will go a bale, which I've already made. And the bale is the bit that connects the pendant to the chain which comes off it. So the chain will go through the bale. That would be around your neck. I can probably show that over here. And the chain or ribbon or whatever you would have would go through there, and that's your actual bale which connects through to the pendant. And it seems very simple. It's got quite a nice shape, this one. It has a little loop on the bottom of it which connects to the loop on our pendant. So I'm going to bring these two together and to show you the functionality you get from joining those two pieces together. If you were doing something even more simple, people often just use a simple oval jump ring and they connect their pendant to the chain with an oval jump ring. That's the simplest way of making a bale, so a simple round or oval loop, but we're going to go into something a little bit more complicated. All right, so as I said, I've pre-prepared this. When you're making a bale or a piece of jewellery like this, you need to think about the technical aspects, but also you're always thinking about the look of something. So form and function are very important. You need to think about what size chain you might be using, the weight of the object, and how it's going to move. So they're all very important considerations. So as I said, this is a very large, very heavy minted coin, if you like, or medallion. It weighs almost 3 ounces. It's quite heavy. So the function for this to sit on quite a heavy chain, it has to have quite a large bale. This is actually quite a large bale. On a very fine object, you'd have a very small bale. So I'm just going to connect this up. But if we can go back to the other shot, please, Peter. If you look really carefully at this bale, it's a pear shape. and it has a little design decorative element. It's actually been rolled out to have these 3 little curves. But the loop I've put on the bottom has an open cut on the back. So it's a jump ring soldered on. I'll get a little bit closer to the camera there. And you might just notice at the very back here, the jump ring is not soldered closed. So this sits at the very back of the pendant. This is the front where you don't see the solder join. So I'll discuss that as we work our way along. So I'm going to attach that now to my pendant, and I'll just show you how tightly I can get the pendant to the bale to make it attractive and still functional, but also enable it to come off if I need it to come off. So I'll do that now. I'll just get some pliers, change my glasses so I can see a little bit better. I'm going to get a heavy pair of pliers here. Hold that bale carefully. It's kind of tricky, this one, because it is very, very heavy. In fact, I might hold the bale on this. Oh, a little bit of solder's gone through there. I'm just going to have to cut that open. Unexpected piece of solder. That's better. So I can now twist, carefully twist, putting quite a bit of strain on that. I'll snap it off. Hope I can do this. Terrible if it snaps off. Twist that loop. I'm going to put the pendant on the correct way around. So might just have to open that just a fraction more. It is a bit awkward, this one, because it is very, very large and a very tight ring. So one of the things I wanted to alert people to is that when you do connect your pieces together, when you're thinking about design and how things function, one thing I've learned as I've got older, as you do, is you're trying to make the gap between the loops that you use in your bales as tight as possible. One thing that really irritates me about jewelry is when people have a pendant and they have these huge gaps and gigantic rings and loops and things, and you look at them and the chain is removed from the pendant. It's as if there's a pendulum or something in between, and that's something you want to try to avoid because it can ruin your design. So this is very tight. I probably should have tried this before, but I think I'll get it. Bring that around. That's better. Just needs a little bit of adjustment, but I'll leave the gap on that. And if we can go back to the other camera, please, Peter.
Yep.
You can see that the 2 loops, the 2 jump rings are very tight. There's virtually no movement, but there is enough movement to make that work. Sideways, front ways. It's also heavy enough to take that 72 gram weight that's going to sit in here once I put the pendant in, or the medallion in, pop that in. That'll have to be rub set eventually. But I've got the movement I need for the function, sideways, forward and back. The loop is strong enough not to solder. So even though I've closed that up, and that little gap, if you can just see it there, that little gap is at the very back. This is the front. You don't see the gap from the front. The back is at the gap in the jump ring is at the back of the pendant. And it's extremely strong, and there's no way short of snapping my neck when this is on a chain that you'll actually pull them apart. And that's why it is important that the scale you use is appropriate to the weight of the material and the thickness of the material and the type of material, whether you're using gold or platinum or silver. So that's a really nice functioning bale. It's close to the pendant. As I said, if I'd used a bigger jump ring, something that's sort of 8 by 5, I would have a 2 or 3 millimeter gap in here, and the whole thing then, in my opinion, starts to get a little bit ugly. So you're really trying to get something that will sit on a chain. It will have movement, but it's not a distraction to your pendant itself, if that makes sense.
It does. Beautiful. Thank you, Chris.
So that's
and Skipper said g'day to you too.
Oh, g'day, Skip. Glad you're there. Hope you're feeling well today, and yeah, you're enjoying the same sunshine that I am. So that's a simple bale, relatively simple bale, quite a large bale, large object, form and function are good. Now, most bales, as I say, are usually oval or pear-shaped, and that again gives you that sort of finesse in jewellery, if you like. If you just put a round ring on, it's not much in the way of design. So I do a lot of pear-shaped bales. So coming down, tapering down, nice little pear shape, very fine point where it joins your pendant. So I might just show you a couple, just so you get a bit of a feel for them. These are sort of finished pieces. If we go back to the other camera, if that's okay, Peter. This is a pendant, nice little amethyst set. It's a little medallion. And this one has a bale, which is an oval, just an oval wire. It's a gold wire. So it's a silver pendant with an 18-karat gold bale. The little loop on top of the pendant is in 18-karat gold. So whatever alloy you use, you need to make sure that you're not wearing out a silver link with a gold link. So it's quite an expensive pendant. It's got an expensive stone. It's got a gold setting. And I've attached a very fine, tight 18-karat gold jump ring to the top of the pendant and put a very simple 18-karat gold loop through there. I'll see if I can put a chain through. This chain may not fit through there. It does. A little bit heavy, this chain. And there you've got your movement and a very simple oval link on the top there that allows that to function nicely. Again, very small opening on the jump ring, and it's just a little bit wider than the thickness of the loop that goes through it. And so that's really important. That's a simple one. Something a bit more complicated. This is a little mock-a-may garnet piece I've made. So it's the mock-a-may is the actual pendant section. It's in a gold setting. Now this one, I'm going to show you this bale. This is a 18-karat gold bale. It's concave. It's pear-shaped. And there's a little very fine wire that connects the pendant to the base of the bale. It's a little bit hard to see here, but you can see it's a pear shape. Tapers to the front, tapers down as it comes in to where it meets the pendant. So it's got a nice, elegant, if you like, feminine form, very, very elegant form to it, very simple, but it actually is being concaved out to make it look lighter. Another example, something that's a little bit heavier. This is also mock-a-may. It's quite a large heart pendant with the mock-a-may section in it. And this is on rubber or Kautschuk, as they say in German. And if I just turn that around, it's the same thing. It's got a nice little pear shape to it. It's on a little wire. And what's important about this one is that you'll notice that this pendant has quite a deal of thickness to it. And you'll see there's a slight tilt towards the front. See how it's sort of tilting a little bit? When I sit it like that, you can see, a little bit hard to hold this with the camera, but the mistake people often make with pendants is that the loop that's attached to the top of the pendant often is in the wrong spot, and the pendant will push like this back. It won't sit properly on the body, flat on the body. It will actually flick forward. So one of the things I'm trying to get people to understand is that where you put the loop on your pendant, depending on the weight of the pendant, the actual physical weight of the pendant will determine how well it sits on the body. And that comes with practice, of course. So you really do have to think about, where am I going to put my little jump ring on the pendant so that when the bale goes through, it sits beautifully. Another example. And of course, bales are used for things like pearls, this little pearl pendant. Same thing. This one's handmade. It's 18 karat gold, and it actually has a platinum loop on the top and a platinum pin. So the two bits that are working together, that are rubbing together, were the jump ring. So platinum jump ring on the top and a platinum pin through the bale, and that allows it to get nice even wear. Okay, so I'll show you how that pin and pear-shaped mechanism works. Perhaps I'll go through just the initial shaping of a bale. So you normally start with a thin piece of material, perhaps 0.9 or 1 mil. Depending on the width of your bale, it might be 2, 3, 4, 5 mils wide. And I think you wouldn't make it probably any smaller than 18 millimeters, maybe 20 millimeters long, because by the time you curve it up into a pear shape, it'll be quite small. So I'm working on strips here that are 30 mils long, because I'm making a couple of larger bales here. You start with your flat strip of metal. Then you then go to the ring bender. I'm going to go to the ring bender and bend that up. And pre-curve the shape. So I'm starting to curve that around from the flat sheet, and that will eventually become a nice little C shape. Lovely little C shape, pre-curved, ready to make into a proper pear shape. I'm then going to get my lovely round and flat nose pliers and put that bale into the pliers. This is basically how I hand make all of my bales. I get that preliminary curve shape. So this is quite heavy. This is actually heavy material. It's about 1.25, so it's quite hard to bend. I'm going to use my parallels, and I'm going to grab onto the ends of that sheet and pull the material around, grab the other end, pull the material around to the point where I can get my parallel pliers on to the end of the material. And I'm just going to squeeze that up carefully. I'm trying to maintain the curve that I've got. That's gone beautifully. And I've now turned that into a really lovely pear shape. To start
So it's gone pear-shaped, Chris.
Sorry?
It's gone pear-shaped.
It's gone pear-shaped, literally. Sometimes it can be worse than that. Yeah, but it's pear-shaped. Control pear-shaped. No
worries. Yeah, just wondering, are you able to move your camera that we're on now just around to the left a little bit so we can see your bench peg there? Because that's perfect, yeah. It was right on the edge of the screen a second ago. Yeah.
Okay. So when I've got to that pear shape, I've arrived at, where am I? I'm lost. I think it froze.
Okay.
When I've got to the pear shape, I then have to cut the ends so that the pear shape will come together. So this is another sample, actually. I've just done the one. This one will just have the flat ends on it, quite rough. I now have to put the saw frame through and cut through. So which I've sort of already done with this one, but I'll just sort of demonstrate that maybe if you can see it. Now I'll get there in a second. I think that'll go through the gap anyway. So after you've made your pear shape, you can just see that you're going to have to cut your way through the gap several times until the ends come together in a true pear shape. Now I've still got a gap here. Oh, where am I? All these double cameras, very, very difficult. So I'm still going to have to bring that together before I solder it. So I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to do that by heating the material up. We've got a flame going here. I've got my flux, my boracic mix. So good morning to Sarah and Kay and Skip and anyone else who knows me, maybe Emily. Okay, so I've just had the metho on there. I'm going to heat this up and anneal it so I can bring the join properly together to solder it. Very carefully give it a squeeze while it's hot. There we go. Very careful if you do this that you don't flick hot metal around the workshop. So just by heating that gently while it was hard, and as it anneals, it then comes together nicely. So that's now, it should be together enough to get a bit of solder through there, through that gap, and fill that gap up. So we'll just quickly solder that. I'll do some couple of pieces of solder here. Two. It might be big enough, we'll see. Hopefully we can get that where people can see it. Put some flux in there. So that's protected with boracic and borax, and then the flux, of course, is for the solder join. Just going to bring those two beads of solder together. Place that on top. Yep. Yep, perfect. Okay, so that's nicely soldered together, and I've got my pear shape, but I now have to do a little bit more work to it. So I'll pop that in the pickle. And that's pickling out. So what we're doing here is we're creating the actual bale itself. The size of the bale will be determined by the length of wire or sheet that you use. Pre-curve it in your ring benders. Do the rest with your pliers. Bring it round into a pear shape. Get it to size. Cut it through if you have to a few times. Sometimes if it's just way too big, you just have to cut it through till you can squeeze it around till it's a bit finer. Get your solder through. And then if you've done a beautiful job, it's probably pre-finished. But there are a lot more things you can do to it in terms of tapering it, because at the moment, this is just a parallel flat sheet of metal. And most of my bales, as I said, that they taper in, they're much sharper. So here's one I prepared a bit earlier. So if you compare the two, one's very flat, it's the same thickness. The other one's quite pointy at the end. You can sort of see it there. This one's much, much finer because I've been filing away at the side. So if I take my piece out of the pickle, we could prepare that for filing. That's now nice and clean. So one of the tools I'd highly recommend to you for a number of reasons is this lovely pear-shaped collet plate. Now, I know AJS have these. I use this not just for settings, because I always talk to people about, why do I have so many tools? They're really handy for so many things. And I'm going to now tap this shape into the collet plate to true it up into a better pear shape, gives me more control. So yeah, fantastic tool to have to even make a bale with. So I'm now going to do that. I don't know if you can see me on the bigger screen, but
Yep.
I'm coming over to my block. Just going to put my earmuffs on. Give that a few taps. Turn it over. Yes, that really does consolidate my pear shape into a proper pear shape because of the collet plate. It really does give it a lovely shape.
Do you want to show it on the other camera, Chris?
Yeah. So it's now got lovely curvature to it. I could tap that down even more. I could actually create a curved top to that bale if I wanted to. There are a lot of things that the collet plate will enable you to do. Now, as I say, you can see that this is flat. It has no life to it. And if I compare it to the one I'm trying to get to, which is my previous sample, sort of put them both together perhaps, and you'll see that this one has the taper to it. So I've filed the taper to it by filing a little bit off either side. So I'm literally going to be filing off, put a little black line on there, all the way back to the top. And I'm going to be filing that shape into it. So it's got a lovely taper. And this one also has, a little bit hard to see, but I've actually cut a groove already at the top. You can just see it there. There's a little groove.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my wire is going to go across. And that wire is the wire that's going to connect the bale to the pendant. So to alter this one I've been working on, I'll just do a little bit of it. I'm not going to do a lot of it because there's more to cover. I'm going to grab that in my pliers carefully. And I'm going to just proceed with a really rough file and start tapering that down to a much finer point at the point of the pear shape and take that off both sides. So I'll start by using the flat side of the file to create some taper. And when I'm confident that I've removed enough metal, I haven't removed enough metal yet, I will go back in with probably AJS have these fantastic lozenge shaped files. These are really good. They have two curved surfaces on them, and so they're not just half round; they're sort of lozenge shaped, but a large file. And I can now get onto this and get a really nice taper with the curve to it. So I have a lovely curve on my bale. These are really rough files. So I've got an O cut and a second cut. Sorry about the noise. Roll that out to the end. Still needs a lot more work, this bale. But I think you can see the point that I'm making, that I'm slowly getting a curvature to the side, and I'll do it on both sides until I eventually end up where I am on this finished bale with a lovely curve. Nice little curve in there and a nice taper down to the bottom.
So, Chris, how do you keep in control of your symmetry? Is it by having accurate lines that you've drawn there, or what's
just by eye, Peter? Just by eye. I'll draw a couple of lines, or I'll draw a centre line and then just work to the centre line and make sure that I'm working one side, turning the bale over and the pliers, work the other side. So yeah, just symmetry.
Yep.
Okay, so once I've got the bale shaped down like that, I'll get my saw frame. I'll do a small cut across both sides of the bale, and I'll actually open the bale up. So even if I got this bale now, this one's solder closed, this one's still open. So I've got the open bale, the original one I made. I would use a very fine setting tool to actually open that up. So if I push that down the tool, so I can show you that, if I push that down the tool, I've now opened up the two sides of the join. So don't be frightened to do that. You can push them back later. And then I can go back into that with my saw frame and do the cut, which will open this up so that I can start burring it out to lay the wire in across the top. So we'll just do this together now, and then you'll understand why I'm doing this. So I've already pre-prepared this one. I've cut that with the saw frame. I then use a parallel phrase, so a nice fine parallel burr, a very fine one. And I'm going to go across that saw cut. Open that out enough for my wire, which is around about 0.8 mil, I think. And I've already cut a bit of wire off, and that piece of wire is going to lay into that groove on the bale. So it's laying in the groove, and it goes all the way across the bale. And I'm going to solder that in now, and then I'll shorten it off. So I've got a little bit of binding wire here. And this is one of the little tricky things you've got to learn to do, is use your binding wire to help control while you're soldering.
So just while you're doing that, Chris, I will invite people, if they've got any questions, just to ask them in the comments. We'd be only too happy to answer them, I'm sure.
Yeah, please, just ask away. So I'm now going to place that in my cross-lock tweezers. I never, ever place solder of silver in cross-locks if I can help it, because I'll crush it. And that's just sitting up just nicely for me to be able to solder that wire across. Now, I'm only going to be soldering one side of the wire in, because I need to still connect this to my pendant. So I'm going to get my piece of wire, get quite a fine piece of solder. I'd use probably a medium solder, because you want it to be reasonably flexible. I'm going to flux this whole object because I'm trying to keep it clean. You could use your brassic again. Get that nicely fluxed, especially my little grooves. Put my little wire across. Get that into the groove. Tiny bit more flux, and I'm only soldering one side of the wire to the bale. There we go. Heat that up. Can't find my solder now. It's there somewhere. There it is. And very carefully, gently hit that side. Introduce my solder. Yeah. Wants to slide down. There we go. I think that's soldered. Sometimes you can't see it run. Don't want to burn the wire. I think that's fine. I think everyone was holding their breath then.
We were. It was a moment of drama.
It was. Too much flux and I can't see what's going on, but I'm pretty confident that's soldered on. Let me just grab onto that. Yep, that's not coming off in a hurry. Okay, so I've got to remember to take off my binding wire before it goes into the pickle. Otherwise the pickle will go pink.
Chris, just a little aside, I was wondering, because we're having this automatically with comments on the bottom, you know, the subtitles.
Yes.
And when you said the word flux, I was wondering what the subtitle would come up with, and it gave you 4 asterisks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I assure you it wasn't the F-bomb. It just was not the F-bomb at all. Well, that'll only be a couple of seconds in the pickle. So this is a much smaller version of exactly the same thing. This is one that I have a master pattern for. Let me get this on my finger so you can see it. There we go. So this is the bale, and there is a wire across the bottom, and you'll see there's a little gap to one side on one end. And I'm now going to open that up with my little mandrel. And this is what I do before I attach the bale to the pendant. So now, take that off the mandrel again. You'll see there's a bigger gap. See that gap at the back there? And that's where I'm going to slip that onto my pendant. So if I get my pendant, got a little heart-shaped pendant here. And on this one, there'll be a stone set in here, but this little top decorative section is where the bale attaches to the pendant. I've even done some homework. I've got a finished one here. And that's where the bale goes through the little loop at the top there. So to attach that to the little heart shape, I've opened up my bale. I work out where the front of my pendant is, and I've opened that up enough to drop that onto the wire. So that is now sitting on the wire, but of course it will easily fall straight off the bottom until I close the wire up, and then I solder it together. So I'm going to slip it back on again. There is a gap there of about 1 millimeter, which I have to close up. There it is. You can see the gap at the back. There it is. That's looking nice. So I've got to grab the wire, and I've got a nice pair of, let's see, round nose pliers. I'm going to slide them in on my bale. Do this so I can see what I'm doing, and I'm going to squeeze the bale down until the wire closes up onto that little groove at the back. Remember on the sample that's in the pickle there, I grooved both sides. So I'm going to have to shift this because I can't see what I'm doing. That's better. Perfect. So that bale is now squeezed up, and the wire comes through the back, and it's actually protruding a little bit at the back. You can just see a little snib there where the wire has gone all the way across that groove, and that cannot fall off anymore. So, I think I'm freezing up here. I'm definitely frozen. No, we're all hanging. Good old internet. There's probably too many people in the house using the internet. So that's now attached but not soldered. And all I need to do now is place that on the mat very carefully and solder that through. And again, this is where a little bit of skill comes into play when you're soldering very, very fine solder joins. This one, I guess you could do under tension, but it probably wouldn't be that good under tension. I think it's better to be soldered. So this one, if I've got another minute, I can solder that together. Show you how to do that. So I've now fluxed and coated my complete pendant so it won't fire scale up. I'm going to see if I can turn that around. You may or may not see me do this because it is very fine work. I just need to turn this piece so that the, yeah, no, I'm not going to solder that through. I'm not happy with that. Oops. It's just a wee bit too much gap. Just have to squeeze it up a little bit more. So if anyone's got any questions about why I'm doing what I'm doing, please send them through to Peter. Push that a bit too far. You still there, Peter?
I'm here, and our audience is. We just need a question or two to enhance the demonstration, I'm sure.
That's it. Someone throw a question to me. That's better. I just pushed that a little bit tighter. I want, again, this is all about movement. You need to get just enough movement so it doesn't catch up. It sits nicely, but you don't want it sort of flopping around aimlessly. How are we going for time? We've got about 15 minutes left, a bit under. So if I get a bit of solder, or am I looking here? Something really super tiny that no one will see except for me. Oh, lovely. It's a nice small piece. So these are very small pieces of solder. I'm trying to be very careful that I don't run any previous solder joins. Set fire to my flux there, my metho. Just position that on the mat so that the only thing that's going to be touching is the wire against the back of the bale. So this is now the very back of the piece. The front's already done. There's my little piece of solder. I'm predominantly heating up my bale here. I don't want to get too much heat into the pendant. Perfect. Now heat that up carefully, and that's already run. Need a little bit more solder. I think it ran the wrong way. Good old silver. Such a good heat transfer with silver. You've got to be so accurate because it transfers heat instantly to every part of the silver. I just lost my little bead. Another one. There we go. Put that down on my wire. And I think that one went the wrong way as well, but I think it's run through. Yep, that's definitely run through. I've got tons of solder on there now, way too much. I'll clean that off later.
I've got a couple of questions for you, Chris.
Yeah.
Jane has asked, what flux are you using?
I'm just using the Tenacity 4A, but
Yep.
the methylated spirits mix is my 2 parts boric, 1 part borax. So this little mixture I have in here is methylated spirits, and you can mix up 2 parts boric acid with 1 part borax, and that will protect your silver from fire scaling. So if you actually look at that pendant, you'll see that the bale's all brown from the heat. The actual pendant itself is shiny because I've managed to stop the pendant from fire scaling, from the heat transferring through. And that's what the boric borax mix does. So that's all connected together now, soldered front and back. I've got good movement, it's tight, it's secure, it's got a lovely shape, and it's proportional to the bale itself is proportional to the pendant. So pop that in the pickle. I can go on with the other one, and I shall take the first one out again. So we're hopping around a little bit here, but it's the concept that I think is important that people understand. So with this one, I'm going to work out that's the bit that's soldered at the back. I'm going to snip that off short because that's eventually going to be flush. There it goes. Get in there with the needle file and just make that wire flush with the surface of the bale.
Oh, Chris, Jane just was querying the boric borax mix, 2 parts boric borax. Is that right?
2 parts boric acid, yep, and 1 part borax. And you can get it in big tubs. AJ sell it, and it's extremely handy. So obviously the borax will entice solder to flow, so you have to be careful. But if you use a lot of boric acid, the 2 parts boric to the 1 part borax, the boric acid has a much higher melting temperature, and with the methylated spirits it will stick to your work. And when you heat it up and you apply your tenacity just to the join, you'll find that the piece, after it flambés, will just have this white coating over it. So it's a fantastic way of protecting your material. So I'm going to show you this in just 1 second. I'm going to chop this little pin back a little bit more at the back end. There we go. So I'll do a before and after shot. This piece now has that's the back end. This is the front end. So this is nice and smooth and shiny. The pin is soldered to show it. The pin is actually soldered across the front, but it's in the groove at the back. It's actually not soldered at the back. So this pin is the bit that's going to connect to the jump ring on top of the pendant. Again, I go in with my mandrel and I just gently open up that pear shape. It's a little bit difficult to do. I'm probably going to overextend this a bit, but it's okay. I probably need to shorten my pin just a little bit more. Yeah, your pin doesn't have to be incredibly long, because you only need to open it up about 1 millimetre or so before you just squeeze it down. I've got quite heavy metal here, so it is a bit awkward to do. I'm going to shorten that off a bit more. That's better. Back on the mandrel and just pull it up the mandrel carefully. You don't want to get it too much out of shape. There we go. Take that off. I might just file that at just a fraction. Just shorten the pin just a little bit. Okay, so now I've opened that up. I've lost a bit of my pear shape, but I do have this little 1 millimetre gap in here. You can see that the tweezers go through the gap. and that's where my jump ring is going to attach to the pendant. So the ring would go through there, and then I would squeeze it up. So if I just do that, you'll see what I'm saying. I'm going to use a large jump ring, which is a bit of an exaggeration. But if you can imagine for a second that this is the loop I'm going to, I'll use that one, the oval one. This would be my pendant section hanging off there. I've now connected the pendant to the bail. And then again, as I did before, you squeeze up your bail so that the wire crosses that little bridge, goes into the groove, and you can solder it closed. Got that a bit out of whack. Having a bit of a challenge this morning. Got to line everything up. There we go. Beautiful. So I've now got my pear-shaped closed again. That little loop is sitting really nicely in that gap on that wire. This is a very large loop. It just shows you the practicalities of getting a nice little fine loop through your bail. Okay, so we've just got a few more minutes to go. I'm going to show you something else, if I can get through a little bit of it. So all this leads on to much more sophisticated things like pearl enhancers. So a pearl enhancer is really just a sophisticated bail that allows you to have movement on your bail, and it allows you to move that bail from a chain to some pearls and back again. So what I've done is I've gone through all the processes we talked this morning, and I've made a pear shape. So perhaps if we go back to the small camera again, Peter.
Yep.
This pear-shaped bail, whoops, I've now cut and adjusted, and I've made a half pear shape. So I've actually cut the back out of the pear shape, and you can see that on the top here, I've soldered a little chenier at the top. At the base, I've got my connecting loop that will go onto the pendant, and I've soldered a fine little bead on the very bottom. You can just pick up that bead there. And I'm going to have a wire coming through here, which allows me to put a figure 8 on here. So this can attach and detach, and I can take this on and off a string of pearls or on and off a chain. So had a bit of a look at that, what it looks like. Nice small piece of chenier, pre-shortened. And I'm now going to put a wire through there and just talk you through this. So it's around about a point, well, let me just check it. It's a 0.8 wire, 0.7, 0.8. So it's only about a 2 millimeter chenier. I'm going to put the wire through the chenier. Oops. Quite a long length of wire. And I'm going to bend that wire up until I get a figure 8 that will lock onto my little bead at the bottom there. So I get my wire, give myself a reasonable length, and I'm going to create a fairly tight bend, 90 degrees. And I'm going to pull it up now onto my chenier. See, I'll pull it up and I can no longer get the wire off at that end. Now going to bend the wire really tightly, pull it hard so that this end of the wire pulls up as well. There we go. And I can now no longer take my wire off. I'm committed to the task of getting this done. So I've got a wire that moves up and down. Now I've got to do a little bit of shaping. Just get the two sides reasonably parallel, fairly tight. Just keep checking that you've got movement on your wire through the chenier. Then I'm going to go down towards my bead. Now I do have to get some curvature into this wire, so I'm going to use some half round pliers and just pre-curve the wire. I'm going to open it up, but get a little bit of curvature. So I'm sort of almost mimicking the pear shape again on the back, just on the wire portion. A little bit more curvature in there. Yeah, maybe just a fraction more. So I've now got some curve on that wire. So when it closes up, the whole shape is a bit more like a pear shape. Now I'm going to swing the wire quite tightly over my little bead at the bottom. So first of all, I'm going to do the short end. To be a little bit fiddly, I'm going to find the right pliers here. Too many pliers out. Here we go. Pre-curve this because I need to get the wire to wrap around my little bead. It's getting there. Okay, so I've pulled one wire around the bead, and now I've got to pull the other wire around the bead. So I'm going to twist that one out of the way. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to finish one side at a time. We may not get all the way through this, but it's maybe homework for everyone. Didn't I give people homework before, Peter?
I'm not sure, Chris.
I thought I had. I thought teachers always gave homework.
Well, that was my standard response to my teacher. I'm not sure, miss.
That's why you said that. Yeah, no, it's always good to. I'd encourage everyone to give this a go because it is very fiddly, but it's also incredibly empowering if you can create working mechanisms. Well, that's gone quite nicely. So I've got one pre-shaped. I'm going to snip that off. So I hope everyone's thinking about getting themselves some really nice collet plates. Leave that a little bit longer, especially the pear shape. They are super handy. So I've now got one wire curved, nice little curve there, so it will flick down over the ball, and I've got to do the same with the other one. Don't you hate it when you run out of time?
Mm-hmm. You're right. Don't rush, Chris. Yeah, okay.
Check this one. That's coming around nicely. And roll this one back out on itself. Not quite right, but close. They are fiddly. They do take a little bit of time. That's not bad. Okay, I'm going to snip that one off. I apologise, it's so hard to show this and do it at the same time, but that's the reality of Zoom. Just going to make this a little bit tidier, and then I can share them with you.
So it just goes to show the elegance is in the detail, isn't it, Chris? It's these little things that if you do elegantly and beautifully, it just adds up to a marvellous package, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. I love making it. They look so simple. So I've now got my wire. There are two little ends there. I'll just pull them apart a bit with the pliers, with the tweezers. So they are not joined, but they sort of swing around. They go over the bead. If I pop that down, they swing around the bead, and there's a little extension on the end there, which I have to solder closed before I start adjusting the tension, the mechanism on that. So this is basically going to click over the wire, lift up, allow me to put my pearls in or my chain in. I can close it down, lock it up, lock it down, and you've got a really nice secure mechanism. So yeah, I think that might end up being a little bit loose, but I'm going to give this a quick go, and then we can finish for the day. So if you've got any questions, get them in quickly now.
So Orietta's got one for you, Chris, and she was asking, is it wrong to hold the bale with the third hand while soldering?
Orion, is it?
Orietta.
Orietta. Hi, Orietta. Look, I've worked so much in silver and all these various metals, and I'd have to say that the cross-lock tweezers, these tweezers are very handy, but you know, it's not wrong to do anything, but you'll completely change your experience if you use binding wire. If I put something like this in the cross-lock tweezers to solder it, so if I pop that in there and I start soldering this, I've got to get such a big hot flame to solder this, a really hot flame, because all the heat is leaving the silver and going up into the cross-locks. So silver is the best conductor of heat that exists, and it means you're actually heating up the whole of these cross-locks just to get that solder to run. The second I put a little bit of binding wire between me and the tweezers, all I'm heating is the silver component. And suddenly your world will change. You will have 10 times more control. And I always say this to people: the minute you pick up a ring and you think, oh yeah, I'm going to solder the ring, and I'll pop it in my cross locks and I'll do the solder join, it's probably the worst thing you can actually do. The tweezers are great, and they are good for holding some objects, but if you can put a binding wire between you and that object, you'll suddenly be a different goldsmith. I promise you.
Great tip. Thank you. Thanks for the question, Orietta.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yep, I never chastise people when they use them, but I always call the cross locks the most dangerous tool ever made. They are a fantastic tool. You can see I use mine, but I think they're terribly misunderstood, because you've got to learn about how metal behaves before you sort of use a tool like that. I think it's a pretty common mistake that I think teachers make in training people at TAFE. They don't explain well enough how metal behaves under heat. So yeah, it's a good one. Good question. So I'm now going to sit this on its own. I know we're sort of just going a little bit over time. Is that okay, Peter?
Yep, we've got a couple of minutes, no worries.
And I'm just going to quickly solder this closed. Hopefully it won't spring. You could actually fuse these as well. I've probably got enough control to fuse these closed. They mightn't be close enough together though, that's all. Yeah, I'll use a bit of solder. And put just a little bit of solder down between these two wires at the very end. If it was platinum, or I'd spent a bit more time getting this right. I think I just lost my solder then. I could actually fuse them closed. Have a little bit of solder. Lost that one. Just well, I've got a little mesh here. Not happy this morning, this solder.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. And partly fused, partly soldered. We'll call that done. Quickly quench that off. Let's give that a micro tidy. So this just needs a little bit more shaping. If I just show this again, I've now got my two little wires soldered together at the very end. So that's now a closed circuit, if you like. And I would now start to tension that figure 8, which means I'm actually going to turn into a proper figure 8 by getting in with some rat tail pliers over my wire and squeeze them in so that I've shortened the wire, and it makes the shape at the bottom lock over the little bead at the bottom. You can see I'm going to have to do a little bit more shaping. It's just starting to think about clicking on. Straighten that a little bit. Won't get this quite finished, but as long as it looks like it's semi-done, you'll know what I'm doing. I'm going to roll that out.
It looks as though we've lost your other camera there, Chris. We've only got the big one.
I might have run out of battery. Darn. That's what happens in a Zoom. You can't charge at the same time with the microphone in. Just got to twist that a bit more. So I'll just try to hold that up. Oh, it's going to get a little bit hard to see now. Darn. So I've now got movement on my little wire. I've squeezed the wire right down, so it's now in a figure 8 or an hourglass shape, and that little bead, this is not quite adjusted properly, but the wire actually goes around the bead, and I can push it down to start locking it, and I've got a little tail at the end where I can lift it up to remove it from a set of pearls. So if I had some pearls, these are probably not the right sort of pearls. It's probably not a big enough piece, but that would pop over the strand of pearls like that, in between the pearls, and the figure 8 would come down over the top and lock in at the back. And then I've got my pendant. Oops, just lost my pendant. When that locks in, you can then hang a pendant off your pearls. You've got a nice little Bale, and that would sit in between the pearls. Quite difficult to see because of the scale now, but the pendant would just come off that little loop at the bottom there, and we'd be done. So slightly more sophisticated form of Bale, but yeah, it's something I think people should try to make at some stage. Make some sort of pearl enhancer Bale, and it'll really increase your repertoire of what you can do.
Chris, Daphne asked what diameter wire is that?
So this is a 0.8 wire, and it's a 2mm chenier. So it's about a 0.6 wall thickness chenier, and you can get that from the metal suppliers, or you can draw down your own chenier. So it's just a 2mm chenier with a 0.6 wall, which gives you 1.2 across and a 0.8 hole in the center. And I think 0.8 is quite fine for that sort of scale, that sort of strength, especially if your wire's semi-work hardened, it'll be quite strong. Yeah, so that's our little pearl enhancer. So hopefully you've got something out of the bales. There's been a lot to cover. We might cover it a bit more in another exercise, and I'll show you some completed pieces. But yeah, it's a very important part of jewelry production because there's movement involved, there's design involved, and lots of technique involved, of course. So yeah, don't forget to invest in some really nice pliers. You know, this lovely round nose, round and flat nose, simple things. And if you want to get something special, get yourself a nice collet plate. You'll be able to shape up all of your pieces beautifully. Yeah, and I hope you've got something out of that.
I'm sure we have, Chris. Thank you very much for your insights there today. It's always great to share your bench with you. And thank you to our audience for coming on board and asking your insightful questions. And they're giving some great praise. Thank you, Orietta, Natasha, Wayne, for your comments. Really appreciate it. Okay, until next time, Chris, we'll see you then.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.